There you are again. I never thought the two of us would meet again. Today, I want to talk about a game that has a special place in my heart. A game that, despite its many flaws, happens to be one of the most unique and strangely enjoyable experiences in the gaming world. Jurassic Park Trespasser. As is clear from the title, Trespasser is a Jurassic Park game. It was released in 1998 as a sequel to the second Jurassic Park movie, The Lost World, starring everyone's favorite Chef Goldblum. The game was surrounded with an incredible amount of hype leading up to release. Unfortunately, the game ended up causing quite a bit of disappointment. The developers were a little too ambitious with their goals given the technology of the time, and on top of that, it was rushed out. It is, in my opinion, still the best of the Jurassic Park games, though. Other than maybe the LEGO games, but LEGO games are always good. That might be a bit of nostalgia talking, but I seriously do think the game has a lot of great qualities that are overlooked. This is precisely why I want to talk about it. So, let's get into why Trespasser is a truly special game. Just as a brief note before I really get into the video, this video is going to be split into two parts. The first being a retrospective/video essay on why I think Trespasser is great, and the second being why I think the game deserves a remake. Now, without further ado, I'll actually get into the content of this video. Until I was about 6, my family didn't have many video games other than the few that my dad had on his computer, and Trespasser happened to be one of them. My brothers and I were so intrigued with this game that had guns and dinosaurs that it ended up being one of the first video games that we played, or at least watched our dad play. Since that young age, I've gone back to play it countless times. The reason I mention this is to let you know that I do have a history with the game, and that I may have a slightly biased opinion due to nostalgia, but I do genuinely think Trespasser is quite incredible. The premise of Trespasser is that you play as a woman named Anne, who becomes stranded on Jurassic Park's Site B. One of the player's arms is broken, making the player required to use one arm to do everything. So pretty much you have to fight your way through dinosaurs to escape the island with one usable arm. The concept of using one arm for everything is quite interesting, but I'm honestly not sure if it was intentional, or if the developers didn't have time to rationalize mapping out a control scheme before the game's release. With modern first-person shooters, it seems strange they wouldn't just have a more logical, similar setup for it, but I guess at the time, FPSs weren't really huge, and those that existed didn't have as fluid controls as we are now used to. So the developers had to find a way to change the FPS formula for the game. Their decision, as strange as it may have been, was to have both looking and positioning the character's arm to aim and grab objects be tied to mouse movement. This was switched between by holding down left click to move the arm. The player is then required to alternate based on what needs to be done at the time, which can get quite confusing during combat. Other than shooting dinosaurs, the player must also control the arm to pick up items, of which only 2 including weapons can be held at a time, making the player have to think about what they will need. They are also required to move the arm in order to manipulate the held item. This whole arm movement mechanic becomes even more confusing when it's tied to the physics engine in the game. The physics in Trespasser are wonky as fuck. Obviously, this was a relatively early attempt at trying to implement a full physics system like this, so it has to be forgiven to a certain extent. Some of it works surprisingly well at times. There are puzzles that require the player to throw rocks or use guns to knock down boxes or platforms. The player needs to be actively aware of their surroundings and the positioning of what they are holding to defend themselves. The dinosaurs can even knock your weapons away if they get too close, which is super cool, but it can also be problematic at times. Everything does have insanely high collision though, to the point that sometimes the dinosaurs will bounce up into the air, or that a gun will get caught in a wall while you're trying to move. Sometimes the doors get caught on the ground and become nearly impossible to open. Sometimes T-Rex will get caught in walls, or sometimes they will ride each other. There are even times the models will just implode entirely. The thing that the physics is most important for though is the arm movement. Because the game functions based on the arm movement, everything that is done with the arm also has to work with the physics of the game, which it does most of the time. There are, however, times when the player's arm will morph and wrap around a gun and become immovable, or that the arm will get caught in a box or even collide with the player's body so that they can't aim. It's all incredibly janky, but it's still playable, and as weird as the physics are, I think it is one of the most enjoyable qualities of the game. It breaks immersion for sure, but it has a quality that makes it enjoyable because of its stupidity. The gameplay loop in Trespasser is quite repetitive, but doesn't really get boring in the time it takes to beat the game. It can pretty much be summed up as you walk around, find weapons, keep track of your ammo, shoot dinosaurs, and occasionally hide or run. There really isn't much else to it. It's generally just fun. It can even be a little scary at times. Sometimes a raptor will come out of seemingly nowhere, or one will catch up to you while running to scare the shit out of you. When it comes to fighting dinosaurs, you either shoot them with guns or attempt to do the unbearable melee combat. I have tried many times over the years to use melee in this game, and I have not once been able to kill a dinosaur without cheats. The guns, however, work pretty well. There's even a surprising amount of weapon variation. You have to use the weird arm mechanic to aim, so it can be really hard to tell where the gun is pointing, but after the first level or two, you get used to it, and it's not so bad. Part of what makes the gameplay a little more stale is that there really isn't much enemy variety. Raptors are the main enemies and pretty much the only thing you actually fight. They are separated into 3 different packs that you see at different stages of the game. The different packs just have different color schemes and no variation other than that, but it's still cool. There are of course T-Rex, which generally you just kind of want to run away from because they are nearly impossible to kill. Then there are also Albertosaurs, which take the role of a smaller, easier to deal with T-Rex. I'm actually from Alberta, so it's cool to see a dinosaur that has been almost exclusively found here make an appearance. Other than that, there are 4 herbivores which don't really attack the player. There's Brachiosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Stegosaurus, and Triceratops. The Triceratops can hurt the player, but don't really ever actively try to. So basically, there are only 3 different enemies in the game that you fight over the course of 8 levels. Yet somehow, I don't find that it hurts the gameplay that much. Something I love about the game is that there is no HUD. The player character either knows or generalizes how much ammo is in a gun, so that you're aware of how much ammo you have.
5. 4.
You can only hold 2 items at a time, so there's no need to be aware of any inventory, and the player's health is displayed on the character's body. I really like all of this because it helps keep the player a bit more immersed and feel more like they're in the shoes of the character. I do, however, have an issue with where the developers decided to place the health marker. The developers, I guess, didn't think it would be creepy or weird at all to have you look down at the character's breasts to see your health. I mean, they went with a heart tattoo as the health marker, so why not just put it on her arm, which you are always looking at? It's definitely a choice. The story of the game is fantastic. On startup, the game opens to a brilliant voiceover by Lord Richard Attenborough.
My name is John Parker Hammond.
This is easily one of the best qualities of Trespasser. Attenborough's voiceover continues throughout the course of the game, being the main driving force for the game's story. It's so soothing every time the VO comes on, it almost lures you into a false sense of safety amidst a dinosaur-infested island.
I dropped the mug, it shattered. I let it lie there. We would be leaving soon.
Anne, the player character, has read John Hammond's book and is aware of the events of Jurassic Park. So as you progress through the island, Attenborough's voiceover comes on to explain things that happened on the island and the process of creating Jurassic Park. Then at times, Anne will also have input on the VO, creating a sort of dialogue between the characters.
Dinosaur Park. What a great idea.
It's such an incredible deep dive into the lore of Jurassic Park. This is one of the best ways that I can think of to experience a story in a video game. It's almost like listening to a rich audiobook while experiencing the events of it. The last thing I want to talk about is that Trespasser has cheats. This is something I'll probably make a video on in the future, but I miss when games had cheats. Obviously, there is no place for cheating in multiplayer games, but I really don't see a problem in a single-player experience. The cheats in Trespasser are just simple things like infinite ammo or invincibility. I don't think that it's a good idea to have your only experience with the game be entirely with cheats, but they are there for fun, so if the player wants to use them, they can. My favorite cheat in the game is the Dinos code, which makes all the dinosaurs freeze. It just looks ridiculous. It's simple, stupid, and fun. Having cheats in single-player games is great, and it's always good to go mess around with cheats in Trespasser. I love this game. It may be old and broken, but it's still fun and still has a lot of good qualities. I also definitely believe that when it comes to video games, sometimes intention matters more than result. This game was incredibly ambitious for its time. It was brought down by technological requirements and being rushed out by the publishers, but it still holds a lot of heart. You can tell the developers wanted to make something great and did their best to make it happen, and I think that says a lot about why it is a good experience despite its flaws. It may be janky as all hell, but it's still enjoyable. I would highly recommend giving it a try. I'm sure there is an emulator or something somewhere, or you might even be lucky enough to find a physical copy. Trespasser is a special game that deserves praise even with its flaws. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The YouTube algorithm loves it, and I really appreciate it.